The Caribbean, a collection of countries with a distinctive culture defined by its unique music, dance, food, and arts. With more than 7,000 individual islands, it has a number of cultural influences, including its diverse people. Today, we will explore the rich culture of the Caribbean through music, dance, and food. We will take a deeper look into two Caribbean countries, Cuba and Guyana. Early Caribbean culture consisted of impressive innovations in construction, development in language, and a unique religious cosmology. Advanced weaponry and crafting skills were seen through the creation of the bow and arrow, the hatchet, and the war club made from Guayacan wood. These are just a few of many innovations from early Caribbean people. Advanced thinking was also seen through the creation of a religious cosmology in which there was a hierarchy of deities who inhabited the sky. The Taino kingdom was ruled by a theocratic government arranged into a hierarchy of chiefs. Society was divided into three social classes: the working class, sub-chiefs and noblemen, and chiefs. Although intertribal warfare, as well as European invasions, diminished native populations in the Caribbean, the customs of native people continued to persist in Caribbean culture. European settlers adopted many Taino innovations, including the straw hut, maracas, and the hammock. Beginning in the 16th century, the Caribbean islands were occupied by British, French, and most prominently Spanish colonizers. These colonizers became increasingly interested in finding gold in the rich soils of the Caribbean. The native population of these islands were forced to work in gold mines until their populations became noticeably small. Along with the shrinking size of native populations, the island's gold supply was slowly depleting. Colonizers' economic concerns shifted towards agriculture, and a new source of labor was needed. As slave labor became apparently profitable and effective, slaves were imported from Africa and forced to work on Caribbean farms and plantations. With these people came a diasporic culture known as the African diaspora. The African diaspora refers to cultures throughout the world that are a result of the historic movement and transportation of African people.
Is the connection between African and other cultures is a combination between all these cultures in one.
Well, a lot of the music in the Caribbean came from Africa. A lot of the instruments that we used are African. The basis of all our music is African music. We're in the Caribbean, we were also enslaved, and so a lot of our dance and music was affected by that. Similar to how African slaves would dance and sing in protest to the masters and to their enslavers, Caribbean music and dance was also the same way. It's really like a heavy part of our culture. A lot of our festival has that aspect of dance and song in it because that's just where we came from.
It is something that is seen all throughout the Caribbean through food, music, and dance, as well as other aspects of culture, due to the large population of Afro-Caribbean people.
Dance is a language that everybody kind of feel like everybody speak the same language. So when you dance, it doesn't matter what culture you're coming from. You connect with another person. You send a message to another person. So that's, I think, the connection between the African diaspora and the dance on a dance form is a communication vehicle. Again, so dance, music, and culture, so all almost the same idea. So when we're thinking about music, they have different types of music in a different language, which is coming from different culture. Again, is a vehicle of communication.
And it just comes from our past and where the people originated from the Caribbean. It's not only Africa, though. A lot of it is Spanish and French from Europe, and especially in my country, St. Lucia. It's just a mix of everything.
Reggae, salsa, and calypso music are three styles originating from the Caribbean islands of Jamaica, Cuba, and Trinidad. These are only a few of many music styles influenced by the African diaspora. Calypso music, originating from the islands of Trinidad and Tobago, can be clearly traced back to West African Kiaiso music. Kiaiso music was brought to the Caribbean by the slaves of French planters who would use this style of music to communicate messages about their masters. Kiaiso music later evolved into calypso music, which is now a popular genre in the Caribbean and beyond. This diasporic culture, tied with the influential culture of Spain, as well as that of France, China, and a number of other countries, contribute to the richly diverse culture of the Caribbean. Cuba, an island located in the northern Caribbean. It is one of many Caribbean islands with a culture in which dance and music are part of everyday life and food holds a significant meaning.
Like you have son, you have timba, you have Mozambique, you have all different, you have reggaeton, you have these different types of music, and there is Spanish European influence in son and some of the popular Cuban dances.
Much of Cuba's music stems from one of 5 categories of Afro-Cuban music: rumba, son, canción cubana, danzón, and punto guajiro. These are rooted in the songs of African people brought to Cuba as slaves by Spanish colonizers.
Significance of music and dance beyond entertainment is it does represent a unity of the Cuban people. You know, pretty much, I'm not gonna say everybody dances because that's like grossly generalizing, but people, it's a hands-on culture, so people dance in Cuba, and it has a lot to do with their identity.
Whether it is in the rhythmic beats of rumba or the poetic melodies of son, Cuban music is not only seen on the island. Its influence is seen in many forms of music throughout the Caribbean, as well as globally, in styles such as jazz as well as hip-hop. Cuban food is based around what was historically available for much of its Afro-Caribbean population.
The Cuban food is similar to, like, you know, say African American food historically, and people that have been oppressed and have had to make do with what they had. A lot of the Cuban food is like that. When access to protein, historically, there hasn't been like a lot of access, so that's impacted the kind of food that they had. A lot of carbohydrates, rice, cassava, plantains. There is I guess it's a national dish called ajiaco, which is a stew, and it's made, it has plantain in it, and it also has an ají pepper. And these are basically the remains or leftovers of food that enslaved, beautiful African people could have. They had the leftovers, and so they used that during times of slavery, and it's a national dish that they still eat today. There's also a food called fufu plátano, and you know, plátanos are, it's plantain. Fufu plátano is kind of a mash of plantain and peppers and pork. And that's African influence as far as I'm concerned. In Africa, they eat fufu. It's with sometimes it's made with cassava or plantain, but there's definitely the African influence in Cuba is very strong, and as far as food is concerned, then there is there's definitely that connection to Africa.
The lack of protein is seen in Cuban food due to the non-availability of much of this item. This results in foods including rice, beans, and fruits being staple items in Cuban cuisine. This diet is seen in one of Cuba's traditional dishes, moros y cristianos. Not only is this a delicious dish, but it is also a representation of how the lack of certain types of food and the access to others has shaped Cuban cuisine. Begin by preparing your vegetables. Chop 1 onion, 1 green pepper, and a clove of garlic. Once your vegetables are all prepared, measure out 3 tablespoons of tomato paste, 1 teaspoon of oregano, and 3 teaspoons of cumin. Sauté your vegetables along with the tomato paste and the spices until the vegetables are tender. Add this mixture to 2 cups of cooked black beans and stir until fully mixed. Combine the beans with 3 cups of fully cooked white rice. Again, stir until fully mixed. Guyana, a country on the coast of South America, which is one of the few Caribbean countries not located in the West Indies. Guyana is included in the Caribbean, however, because of its strong ties to Caribbean culture, history, politics, and community. Much of Guyana's music has root in India, and its popular music is greatly affected by Indo-Caribbean sounds. Guyanese music also draws influence from African and Chinese styles, as well as Latin music.
So, some popular styles of music in my country are calypso, reggae, and soca. And I think I can't tell you exactly about the history of each of those specific genres of music, but I think definitely like reggae, from my experience with reggae, grew out of like a culture of resistance to colonization, excuse me. And it began as an opportunity to for people to voice their their love of their culture, their love of their identity, their desire to reclaim a part of their past, especially a past of their African ancestry, and yeah, a form of self-expression and resistance to colonization.
Guyanese cuisine is a representation of its diverse population. It is influenced by African, East Indian, Chinese, and Portuguese cuisine. This is in part due to its location next to Brazil and also the result of its diverse population.
So food is very important in my culture. It's definitely a way that the different groups of people, the different cultural groups in my country, that's a way, like a yet another way to preserve their identities, their cultural identities, and each culture has a very distinct set of spices and foods and how they prepare those foods in my country. So I think that people really celebrate being able to express themselves in that way. And so I think like food is a really big thing. And in my country, we love our food. We love like the diversity of foods. It's definitely something that makes our lives richer, and it's just yet another way of another way of celebrating like the diversity of culture in my country.
In Guyana, education is emphasized and literacy rates are high. Its government is invested in the bettering of public education. They are one of the top countries in educational spending.
One of the privileges that I had in my country is the privilege of attending schools throughout my time in school that were very academically rigorous, that were styled like private schools. These were Catholic schools. So the educational system in my country is very rigorous. There's high expectations placed on the students, and this is throughout all of the schools in my country. So you can access this kind of education whether you have a lot of money or not. So there's a very high value placed on education. So that's one of the privileges that I had growing up in my country.
Our opportunities would be different, you know, like I feel like in Guyana people are more appreciative of what they get and, you know, the opportunities they get.
And in America, there's the public education system, which is sometimes not as rigorous and as challenging as the curriculums in private schools. So they don't always present the same amount of challenge to students or have like the same high expectations from my perspective, I feel. So I feel like my educational experience might have been different growing up in America, because to attend private schools in America, you need to have a high level of wealth to be able to support your kids through that experience. Whereas in my country, it's accessible to people with less wealth.
People really like work hard for what they have, and they really appreciate every single little thing they get. And when my mom was growing up there, she tells me about all the things she went through as a child and growing up and how hard it was, but how like grateful she was with all of the things she got. And even now, like, I see her and she's like just so humble and just so smart. But yeah, I think just the opportunities we would have would be way different.
So what is the Caribbean? It is more than just a vacationing spot or a place with white sand beaches. It has a unique culture with a range of cultural influences and is home to many diverse, talented, and educated people.